Hi, folks. So, I'm filming this instead of just posting about it because I think there's a distance that you put between yourself and your words when you post something online versus, talking to someone face to face. Facebook, this is where I communicate to my family and friends, not strangers on the internet who couldn't care less. So, for something like this that I think is important, but I also understand is controversial, I want to remove the barriers between myself and the people I love most in the world as much as I possibly can. I want to put my full, vulnerable self out there to show that I'm serious, but also, look, I'm a fallible person who's just trying to do the best that I can with the information that I have. I know to a certain extent that I'm burning political capital and goodwill with these vegan posts. But at the same time, I hope that if you're here, you're watching this because you want to, and because maybe you're curious. So, having said that, all the preamble, I'm here to ask you all to consider as much as you possibly can refraining from buying meat and other products made from animals and animal secretions, like meat and milk and butter and eggs. Now, look, up front, please don't get the impression that I'm saying this to try to be morally superior or to put myself above anyone else. My shit stinks just as much as anybody's. If there's a prison where folks go who eat meat, I'm going there, along with everyone else, because I ate meat for decades. It's not about blame. It's about trying to stop the bleeding because the act of eating meat, it's causing harm. Now, some of you may be saying, who are you to tell me how I should live my life? If eating a burger makes me happy, what business is it of yours? I don't tell you how to live your life. And look, if we're talking about what show to watch on TV, what football team to root for, what clothes to wear, you be right. I agree. I would be the asshole in that situation. But what if I was asking you, hey, please don't pay for a ticket to a dogfight? Or please don't pay for child porn? Or don't pay someone to go break Nancy Kerrigan's leg before she goes ice skating? Would I be an asshole then to ask you not to do all those things? What all of those things have in common is that there is a victim created by the purchase. And that's the exact same thing that happens when we pay for animal products. An innocent victim is created. People sometimes talk about veganism as if it's just an issue between vegans and people who eat meat, but there's a third party in play that's often forgotten. The animals, who can't speak for themselves. They can't come on here and say, please stop, they're hurting me for your burger. But I can. And I'm here to argue that fundamentally, buying meat and other animal products is paying for someone to exploit, brutalize, and prematurely kill an innocent animal for something that we do not need at all. Just in the same way as buying a ticket to a bullfight or a dog fight is the same thing. Now, I ask you to consider stop buying meat as much as you can, because some people can't go fully vegan due to practical concerns. Some folks live in food deserts and can't afford basic nutrition without consuming animal products. For all practical purposes, these folks are obligate carnivores due to their circumstances, because abstaining from meat would exacerbate malnutrition even worse than it already is. And as a sidebar, I think vegans should care about the plight of low-income folks living in food deserts. In addition to malnourishing these people by making this kind of poverty possible in our society, we're also taking away people's ability to be as ethical of consumers as they want to be. People in food deserts have access to the internet. They can look up all the reasons why consuming animal products might not be such a good idea. If I simply couldn't live without eating animals, if a mildly healthy life, without violating my ethics like that, I would be pissed. And I think we should be pissed for those people as well and try to change that reality. But back to the main point, for most of us, that's not a concern. If you live near a supermarket, you have access to all the foods, vitamins, and or supplements that you need to survive without meat and other animal products. And the existence of folks who can't currently live without animal products doesn't justify those who can live without them continuing to buy them. Take Typhoid Mary. You know about Typhoid Mary? Typhoid Mary was an asymptomatic spreader of typhoid fever. She spread it to dozens of people, several of whom died, because she didn't wash her hands between using the restroom and cooking people food. Now, if you came up to Typhoid Mary knowing this and said, Mary, you've got to wash your hands. You're spreading disease and hurting people. Imagine if she said in response, well, you know, some people in third world countries can't wash their hands. Would that be a very convincing argument to you that it's okay for her to keep doing what she's doing? I think that a justified response to her would be, yeah, well, you can wash your hands, and you not doing so hurts others. So we should demand a moral obligation from you to frickin' wash your hands. Same thing, I think, applies to eating animals. Just because some people can't practically abstain from animal products due to their circumstances doesn't mean that those who can abstain now have an excuse to keep buying animal products, especially since this leads to unnecessary harm. So, while some folks have to eat meat due to their circumstances, the next question is, does anyone actually need meat and other animal products for physical or medical reasons? The American Dietetic Association, along with the British Dietetic Association, the WHO, and many other leading bodies of nutritional professionals say that a well-planned vegan diet can be healthy for all humans, prenatal to old age. There is no essential nutrient that can't be gotten from a vegan diet, and if you are concerned about one, Google it. So no, people don't need meat to be healthy physically. It's perfectly possible to be healthy on a vegan diet, and thus another option is presented to us. Now, yes, you do need to be on top of things to avoid getting malnourished. You can't just eat French fries and Oreos, even those things are vegan. But do you think you'd fare much better eating only chicken fingers? With any diet, including meat or not, you've got to get the nutrients you need. There are some nutrients that are less abundant in a vegan diet, and protein is not one of them, by the way. B12 is the only one where you basically need to either eat a lot of fortified foods or take a supplement or a multivitamin to get your recommended amount, but so what? B12 supplements are given to animals slaughtered for meat, and that's how meat eaters get that particular nutrient. So, one way or the other, you're going to get it from a supplement anyway. And taking a cheap supplement directly sure beats paying for animals to be hurt. Now, some folks say that a vegan diet is more expensive and that that's a barrier for people. But look, that's only if you buy a whole bunch of meat substitutes. Otherwise, a vegan diet is cheaper than an omnivore diet. So yes, vegan chicken nuggets, they cost more than regular chicken nuggets. And by the way, they only do so because of government subsidies to the meat industry. But you don't need fake meat to go vegan. Yes, you might find yourself eating more things like hummus or oatmeal and peanut butter and rice and beans and fruits and veggies. But again, changing your diet sure beats paying for animals to be hurt unnecessarily. Now, some say, oh, but little old me buying meat isn't going to make meat go away, so why should I bother? But I want to say to that response that it does make a difference because of how supply and demand works. And because in the case of animal products, the product is the thing itself that is suffering, not the people involved in the economics of it. Most people eat meat every day. And that's a lot of times with every meal, every day. So up to 3 times a day. And if all of a sudden you started buying 3 chocolate bars a day, that'd be what, over 1,000 bars of chocolate a year? That's gonna eventually make the chocolate bar company look at their sales and go, well, you know, based on this past year's sales, I project that we're gonna sell 1,000 more units next year. Better give some supply to meet that demand. And then they will supply 1,000 more chocolate bars to your local grocery store to meet that demand. Well, the same thing happens with meat too, but instead of making chocolate bars, they breed animals to meet the increased demand. So, how much impact can your demand have alone? Well, if you go from eating 3 meals a day with meat to not eating meat at all, or even greatly reducing your meat intake, that will result in at least some animals not being bred to meet your demand. If you live in most of the world outside of the US, you'd probably be saving mainly fish by going vegan. And if you live in America, you'll probably be saving mainly chickens. But wouldn't you rather not create a few dozen animals born into a life of misery because of your demand? Every single one of them is a tragedy precisely because it's so easily avoidable, just by choosing something else on the menu. And look, I'm here to tell you those animals, especially chickens and pigs, they live a nightmare. 99% of all animals raised for food, they grow up in factory farms because that's the only way that you can possibly produce the amount of flesh to meet the demand, which, by the way, is 70 billion land animals every year and a trillion fish every year, most of which are fished out of the sea, and that's why, you know, the oceans are running dry. But for the ones that are bred by us in factory farms, y'all, factory farms are basically torture chambers for animals. Chickens have the size of a sheet of paper to themselves. They have sores all over their body because of the ammonia from all the poop that's everywhere around them. They can hardly stand to get a drink of water because their bodies are bred to grow so fast that their legs break. Their hearts frequently can't cope with the stress. Pigs are smarter than dogs, but they're kept in farrow crates so small that they can't turn around in them. They cut the tails off of baby pigs so that they won't cannibalize each other as adults out of boredom and stress. Our food animals, they're basically tortured for weeks till they reach slaughter weight and not a minute after that. And in this context, yeah, slaughter is a mercy, but it's no picnic either. These animals still don't want to die, as evidenced by workers in the stick pit testifying to pigs trying to nuzzle them like dogs before they have to, suppress their feelings and kill the pigs. In the UK, pigs are killed with CO2 poisoning pits, which are basically like Holocaust-style gas chambers. Here in the US, they're electrocuted and then have their throats cut. Let's put it this way. If your pet needed to be put down mercifully at the end of their life, would you ever consider bringing them to a slaughterhouse to be put out of their misery? I hope not. I think to do so would be animal cruelty. Now, all this sounds terrible, and it is. And that's not to mention the environmental impact, that it's the third leading cause of climate change, even more so than all the transportation combined. All that methane produced from cows, the rainforests in South America being torn up to make fields to grow food for these animals, the pandemics which result from having the animals all crowded together, the antibiotic resistance that develops from using most of our antibiotics on these animals so that they don't get sick in their crowded environments, the pig shit that's sprayed on poor people's properties who can't move away from the pig farms because of financial reasons, and the psychological trauma caused to the workers who raise and kill these animals. It sure seems like with all these negative consequences, we wouldn't do it unless we absolutely needed to. And in fact, I'd go so far as to say that the justification to keep eating meat rests on the idea that we have to do it. If that premise isn't true, if we don't need to eat meat for survival, then slaughtering animals for food is inexcusable. It's basically just dogfighting and other animal cruelty. But y'all, that premise isn't true. In our society, we do not need to do it. We do not need to consume animal products to be healthy. Maybe in the 1800s, before we knew about the fundamentals of nutrition and what the human body needs, maybe then it wouldn't make sense to try to make everyone go vegan. But now, in our society where we have access to the global supply of goods at every grocery store, eating and using animal products is no longer needed for the vast majority of people. Now it's a choice. And when it becomes a choice, it becomes a moral decision. So why do we still do it? One reason is that people think that they still need to do it for health reasons, which, as I've already mentioned, is false. Another reason is that it tastes good. People get palate pleasure from the taste of meat. But do we really think that reason justifies torturing tens of billions of animals? Do we really think that someone else's pain is justified by our pleasure? When dogs or bulls or roosters are forced to fight, the people paying to see the show are getting pleasure from watching the fight, but that in no way justifies dogfighting or bullfighting or cockfighting. If I just liked hearing the screams of animals being killed, is that really any different morally than enjoying the taste of flesh of the animal? Maybe it says something about the psychology of one of those people over the other, but morally, it's the same thing. Because in both cases, the animals are going through hell for our pleasure. From the animal's perspective, it is the exact same thing. Hamburgers may taste 20% better than Impossible Burgers, but if dog burgers tasted 20% better than cow burgers, would you be a regular consumer of Golden Retriever? I'd say that most of us wouldn't be. Now, some argue that it's the natural order of things and we're apex predators and it's just the circle of life. Y'all, do we really want to try and emulate nature in our society? Animals are raped in nature all the time. Is rape okay to have in our society because it exists in nature? Is it okay to go rape a dog? We have successfully removed ourselves from the world of the survival of the fittest. And now that we have a choice to not deliberately harm animals for food, why wouldn't we take that? To harm animals when we don't have to is just an argument for might makes right. We're stronger and smarter than these animals, so we can do whatever we want to them. If aliens that were stronger and smarter than us came down, conquered us, and started breeding us in slaughterhouses for food, that wouldn't make it right for them to do that just because they are mightier than us. It would still be wrong precisely because we have the ability to suffer just like animals do. Just in that case, we don't feel the weight of eating animals because we're not the ones on the wrong end of it. So another objection is that, well, animals are killed in the production of crops and vegan products. Either way, you're killing an animal, so isn't it hypocritical to say don't buy meat? And actually, I read that argument as a teenager, and it actually prevented me from going vegetarian for many years. I thought, oh, well, if animals are killed either way, then I don't need to think about this further. And it's true that animals are killed when crops are harvested, or in the protection of land by pesticides and the like. So what's the difference? Well, a lot of vegans at first would say, well, many more crops have to be grown in order to feed all of the 70 billion land animals slaughtered for food every year, which results in more crop deaths than there would have been otherwise. So if you're worried about reducing crop deaths, then this is an argument for veganism, not against it. And it's true. It does take more crops, more land, more water, and other resources to feed 70 billion land animals plus 8 billion humans than it would just to feed 8 billion humans. And yeah, so that means that more animals are killed for growing crops under the current system than would be in a vegan world. So in that way, yes, it is an argument against veganism. And by the way, get out of here with that regenerative agricultural crap. That can be done without slaughtering animals if you want to go that route. We don't need ruminants. But I don't want to make this about just counting up deaths. There's a more fundamental moral difference between crop deaths and killing an animal for meat at play here. If a human farm worker was accidentally trapped somewhere on a field where the guy driving the combine harvester couldn't see him, and he died in an accident by getting run over by that combine harvester, would anyone be charged with murder? If someone tries to break into a farm at night to steal food and they're electrocuted by the fence around the property, would the owners of the farm be charged with murder? No, they wouldn't, because those are accidents, and the deaths of those people are unintended consequences of our food system. But now how about if the farmer deliberately kills one of his workers on the farm and then sells that worker's flesh for a profit? Would someone be charged with murder then? Yeah, someone would be. Why is this? What's the difference? because deliberate harm as a means to an end is fundamentally immoral in a way that accidental deaths just aren't. When we build a highway, we know that it's going to lead to thousands of car accidents, dozens or hundreds every year. I don't know the statistics, but are we to charge the construction workers that built the highway and the politicians who approved the building of it with conspiracy to commit mass murder? Even when they know that highways that they're building are going to lead to deaths. No, we don't. But we do charge Joe Blow when he kills grandma for the insurance money. Now apply the same logic to animals, who can also be hurt, just like humans. Crop deaths are like highway accidents. They're unintended consequences that we're clearly willing to live with, even when it's humans dying. Killing an animal deliberately so that we can steal their flesh which doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the animal, they need it, not us. That is causing deliberate and egregious harm against an innocent as a means to an unnecessary end. And also, raising animals for slaughter involves all this extra suffering and cruelty not present in crop deaths, which are pretty instantaneous. Weeks of suffering and exploitation, and a cruel and premature death, that's gotta count for something in our calculus here. I argue that it should count for a whole hell of a lot. One final argument I'll mention is that it's part of culture. It's mama's cooking. It's beer and wings at a Super Bowl party. It's centuries of culinary knowledge. Doesn't that count for something? Yes, it should. It should be considered. And yes, in order for that stuff to be disregarded, it would have to be something really important on the other end. But if every time you ate mama's cooking, someone killed a cat in a horrific way, would mama's lasagna be worth it? If every time you had wings, someone had to torture a chihuahua to death, would you make that trade? I'd argue that most of you wouldn't. I'd argue that not torturing and prematurely killing animals unnecessarily is more important than mama's cooking. And that's especially true now that we have meat alternatives that are getting better all the time so we can keep our traditions and not deliberately harm animals at the same time to keep those traditions. You all, eating meat is wrong. It's morally wrong. We don't need to do it, and it hurts animals tremendously. It's equivalent to paying for a ticket to a bullfight. There may be cultural traditions there. It may be legal in some places and not in others. But either way, an animal is exploited, brutalized, and prematurely killed for something that we do not need in the slightest. And from the animal's point of view, in either case, they are suffering tremendously, and they would like us to stop. I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, and it seems like eating animals couldn't be wrong because everyone around us does it. But that doesn't make something right. If you went back to the Roman Empire and shouted to everyone, you've got to stop owning slaves. It's an immoral violation of the rights and autonomy of people. The response you'd get would be, oh, look at Mr. Self-Righteous over here. Quit trying to judge others, Mr. High and Mighty. Take it easy. Everyone in our society is on board with the slavery stuff, and it's never going to change, so why try? But it did change, and this can too. All we have to do is see the immorality of it and make it taboo. We're basically torturing animals that might as well be our dogs and cats, for weeks at a time for something that we don't need. That certainly calls for a public taboo. If I bought a ticket to a dogfight, my friends would be outraged. We eventually need to get on that same level of outrage for paying for animals to be killed for their flesh, since that and paying for a ticket to a dogfight are equivalent to each other from the animal's perspective. So look, don't stop taking your life-saving medicine that was tested on animals. Don't starve yourself if you live in a food desert. But please, stop buying pork sandwiches and wings because they taste good. Or if you do, remind yourself that the animal whose flesh you're eating probably, almost certainly lived a nightmare. 99% chance lived a nightmare. Didn't ask to be born, and didn't want to die once they were born, and needed their flesh and you don't. We need to stop doing this. We need to stop seeing animals as commodities to do with whatever we want, because might makes right. Like our dogs and cats, pigs, cows, chickens, fish, other livestock, they deserve respect. They deserve a chance at a happy life, or just the chance not to be born into a miserable one. At the very least, they deserve our mercy. Have mercy on farm animals, and please don't eat them. Thank you very much. All right.